Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host, Todd Tavares. Moving beyond questions of God's existence, this podcast asks what atheists should be doing next in a godless world. Hello, Todd.
Hi, Nathan. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. How are you?
I'm doing well. Do you feel like talking about some atheism today, Nathan?
I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
Well, Nathan, let's start at the beginning, right? Because we want to figure out what it means to be an atheist in this world, what atheists should be doing, how are we meant to fit into this world. That's a lot to ask if we don't know what we're talking about as atheists. So you've written about this. What does it mean if you call someone an atheist?
I think I take kind of a broader view, I guess. I think like the more narrow way is to say, someone who explicitly doesn't believe in God, but actually, well, for the purposes of this podcast anyway, I think atheist is sort of a more broad term. And it's really encompassing, or at least what I imagine the podcast will be about, is encompassing all the people who are non-religious in some way.
You like the big tent approach. All right, let's
Exactly.
So and this has been something we've been looking at a lot, are people who are irreligious, people who don't have a formal religion, people who reject religious identity, and typically they're called nuns, right? N-O-N-E-S. So that's what we're thinking about here. Where do people with no religion fit in? Inside of this, I think the one that most stands out is, like you were saying, the atheists, people who completely reject the God, right? The existence of God. People who are either certain or dismissive of it.
I think that's important. I mean, like, whatever label you want to go for, non-religious or secular or atheist or whatever, I mean, I think it's the same point in general. Like, it's capturing the same kinds of people.
And
Yeah,
so I think maybe then the flip side, what would the opposite be then? Because we're thinking about this category: none, atheist, agnostic, irreligious, something like that. What if we're trying to draw two very large circles that don't intersect? What would the other one be?
I guess religious, although I mean that's a super problematic category as well, I suppose. I mean, and also I think another thing to point to is just to make it even more complicated is that, like, there are atheists and agnostics and so on, but then there are people who just sort of check no religion in particular. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't believe in God, or they may even go to church and they may have different sort of views about the supernatural. So I think there's a lot of, in that particular category of, like, no religion, I think there's a lot of kind of potential overlap with other people who we might say are religious.
Okay, and that does remind me of something that's probably important to take into account, is that when we think about nuns, this category of nun, meaning not religious, that it includes people who say nothing in particular, and they might respond with something like that they're spiritual. Right. So they may have feelings of a greater connectivity or something beyond the material world as it exists, but they're not part of an organization that encompasses a worldview or a dogma or sort of institutional structures that have structured belief. So we were thinking about people who are outside the bonds of this. Yeah. And so there are a lot of big questions if we're really going to take on, like, what does it mean to live your life in this sort of way? Nathan, are you a religious person, or are you someone who's on the other side, in the other circle?
I think I'm in the other circle. I would I would probably say I'm an atheist, which you may be apparent by now. Um, yeah, and you?
Yeah, I would go with atheist.
Yeah.
The only trouble I have, let me say, is sometimes vacillating between we have a knowability and we have enough knowledge to say definitively that God does not exist.
Hmm.
And I sometimes soften that view and realize, like, there are limits to our understanding and there's a possibility of metaphysical power that we don't understand. But
Yeah.
that comes with, a complete rejection of what organizations say about the nature of God. Like, I don't believe anything in the
Yeah.
Bible. I don't believe any holy text. I reject the Quran. It's
Hmm.
To me, they're all equally nonsense.
Hmm.
I'm, I'm certain that that is not true. That and that's what makes me more of a hard atheist. And I think we're in that camp.
Hmm.
Um, but
Yeah.
you wanted to speak today about this, and I think in throughout the course of the podcast, think about this connection of nuns
Hmm.
and how people behave, how we ought to behave. What do we know about um, how nuns, this group, behave politically?
Yeah. So you and I have written an article.
Oh, we have?
Yeah.
Wow,
I
that's
don't know.
shocking. Yeah,
Yeah. I don't know. It happens so quickly, and then yeah, you forget about it. But
yeah. And then we
yes.
talk about exactly that topic today.
Well, yes. I mean, but yeah. Well, let's sort of talk a little bit about the article, and then we can explore further issues that arise from it.
Hmm.
So it's not just a rehash of the article. But anyway,
Which people can read, by the way.
yes, yeah. I think there's probably some way like
Yeah.
we can link it with. I don't know. I'll figure that out, I guess. um, yeah. So anyway, we have this article in the most recent edition of the Humanist magazine, which comes out by the American Humanist Association, and it's sort of looking at uh, the most recent American presidential election, which took place last year, and looking at the nuns, the non-religious
Mm.
vote in that, and what we found in the article or in the vote is that an overwhelming majority went over to the Democrats and to Biden.
Mm.
So we found about 70 to 75% of nuns supported the Democrats, and actually, I think, and also when you sort of took out atheists and agnostics, they were even slightly more in favor of Biden and the Dems than just the sort of non-religious people as a whole. Yeah, and so we
Wait, can you say that part again? There.
yeah, sorry, maybe that wasn't totally clear. Um, the category of nuns, so that includes atheists, agnostics, and other people who check no religion.
Mm.
So they went strongly in favor of Biden. But if you look at just the atheists and agnostics, they're slightly even more in favor of Biden than the whole like the no religion category as a whole.
Mm.
If that if that's clear.
So yeah, so in this the big circle that we've created of none, in it,
Hmm.
people, like, there are some differences.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Um, but what's between how fervently they voted Democrat, how in if we well, first of all, not to court too much controversy, but
Uh-huh.
we did find that Biden won the election. That
Yeah.
absolutely happened.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah.
Biden won, with
Yeah.
and this none category, how much was that? How much did they vote Democrat versus Republican?
Yeah, so it was about 70 to 75% um, for the Democrats.
So this is about 3-1
Yes, right.
pro Democrat,
Yes.
which I think is even greater than the way white evangelicals vote for Republicans.
I think it might be a little bit more strongly white evangelicals for Trump, but I mean, I think in the article we kind of made the point that they're pretty similar, like in terms of the support of atheists and non-religious people for Biden and the Dems. It was a similar kind of level of support
Mm,
among white evangelicals for Trump and the Republicans. And another sort of interesting thing about that is that the sort of percentages of the population are roughly similar. Like
mm,
um, the nun population makes up about 20 to 25% of the whole U.S. population,
mm.
and it's roughly the same for white evangelicals. Again, about 20 to 25% of the population.
Wow.
So I mean, it's sort of interesting. Like one of the things we kind of talked about in the article is that there's kind of an imbalance. I mean, like you have such strong support from this particular demographic bloc for the Republicans and then for the Democrats, but in the case of the Republicans, they're they really go out of their way to court the white evangelicals and
Mm,
like kind of pay them back for their support.
mm. Yeah.
Whereas it's not. I mean, like one of the things we kind of asked in the article is like, why don't the Democrats treat the nuns in the same way as the Republicans treat white evangelicals, given the
Right.
similar levels of support and similar uh, percentage of the population.
Yeah. Yeah. And we know. I mean, it's really it's I don't know if obvious is the right word, but it's clear that they form a real power block for the Republicans.
Yeah.
Members of the cabinet who were white evangelicals, hardcore white evangelicals like Betsy DeVos and Mike Pompeo.
Hmm.
We also know that evangelical support was crucial. In fact, it seems to have led the particular court appointments. Like they're drawing from either right wing think tanks and groups or from the lead of evangelicals, picking the people that they want,
Hmm.
and make their issues a plank in the party. And we don't see that. That's definitely something we don't see in the Dems. There isn't a secular platform, an overt secular platform that's
Yeah. Yeah.
being promoted.
Hmm.
And which is, like you say, that's really strange because this is such a big voting bloc and it's so
Yeah.
solidly democratic that
Yes.
they look, I mean, it's a mirror image of the of white evangelicals.
Hmm.
But one of the things that's happening is we know that the non-religious, this none group, None, none,
Hmm.
is
Yes.
growing a lot faster, right?
Right. Yes.
So what does that look like in the U.S.?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's another reason why sort of the Democrats might be wise to pay more attention to that voting bloc, given that non-religion is really stronger among young people. It's sort of funny to say young people and not include oneself in that anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, like given that like like non-religion is sort of concentrated among young people, and the vice versa, I guess that um, more the older people are more religious, so
Mm.
this is going to be a demographic that expands, and so they'll become even more important as a voting bloc. So it is like that's one of the things I guess we're sort of puzzling about in the article is why don't Democrats pay more attention and so on. I mean, and even yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a big question. But and I think we know one of the answers right now is that it's still still talking about a um, something that's 20% to 25% of the U.S. population,
Mm,
relatively small. And if you're drawing that from, um, we also know that honestly, most of that category is people who are um, unaffiliated or spiritual or
yeah,
none
that's
of the
right.
above, something like that.
Hmm.
And we know that the atheist and agnostic section, which is definitely stronger, I think we know that they're
Hmm.
slightly more democratic. They have more stringent beliefs, more
Hmm.
particular beliefs. Um, that these are definitely reasons, and there is probably still some bias. And the president that we have right now is very, very Catholic.
Yeah.
Um, and he's open about it. He talks about it. His faith certainly guides him.
Hmm.
Um, as a Catholic myself, because I,
Right.
I, so this is one of the things about nuns, though. When we talk about
Hmm.
this religious group, they keep growing, but
Yeah.
they're not a group that grows from, um, like the way the quiverful movement would, which is like like you're a quiver for God. You need to make more arrows for Jesus. Therefore, have as many children as possible.
Yeah. Right.
It's
Right.
This is coming from an identifiable demographic change that where
Yes.
so and
Yes.
this is something I think we are both examples of, right? I was raised with a faith. I was raised Catholic. I'm a confirmed Catholic.
Hmm.
I reject the divinity of Christ and identify as an atheist. I left that faith.
Yeah.
Is and this is what's happening to most people, right? Most people who identify as nuns.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's the same for me that I was raised Anglican and then and also confirmed, and then I gave that up maybe 10 years ago or something.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, I think it is the case, I guess, in general that religious people are, or a percentage of religious people are becoming nuns, and then those nuns go on to have kids who are nuns.
yeah.
But it's like, I guess the sort of the trend is going, religious people are becoming nuns, whereas nuns are not becoming religious in the
Mm,
same. I mean, I'm sure some are, but the trend is sort of stronger religious people going to nuns than
yeah.
vice versa. So I mean, it's like, that's another reason why the numbers of nuns are going to increase.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we've the it hasn't reached the sort of tipping point in the U.S. yet, but it seems to be on track for that. And we know that in England, I think it's in
Hmm.
all the UK,
Hmm.
where nuns are actually the majority now.
Yeah, I
Where
think it's yeah, or it's pretty close to that. Yeah,
yeah, where or it might be a plurality where they're just the most common.
yeah, yeah.
Where what they saw was that if you were born without a religion, you live your whole life without a religion. Your children
Hmm.
don't have a religion. If you're raised with the children, it's basically a coin flip whether or
Right.
not they
Yeah,
leave. And
yeah.
that I mean you stretch that out over across several generations, and it's pretty obvious. Um, for the American for the American case in particular, we don't know. It doesn't necessarily have to end in the same place. It may follow what Britain has already experienced, but it seems to be following that. And one of the big changes it's already made is that mainline Protestantism, or the
Hmm.
idea of being Protestant, used to be a majority. The U.S. was a
Hmm.
majority Protestant country, and now Protestantism is the plurality. It's been cut down that much,
Hmm.
and certainly in the younger and younger generations. So the finding that was written about in this fantastic article shows like this is it feeds into that sort of narrative that the Democrats had I don't want to say inculcated, kind of allowed to develop going into the 2020 election, which is that demographic change over time makes democratic rule unavoidable. That when we look at the rise of, I think it was in Texas, right, that you
Mm,
have, the changes because of immigration,
right.
accepting of homosexuals,
Mm,
people who traditionally vote Democratic are going to keep voting Democratic. Older generations who are more Republican are going to die off, and then you're
mm,
left with this. All that's left is a solid Democratic majority.
yeah.
But one of the things it doesn't talk about is the reasons why. Do we know? Well, maybe I should put it to you, Nathan. What? So okay, let's just take it for a given. We have this set of facts that are true, right? We have a lot of nuns, people without a religion, atheist,
Hmm.
agnostic, and other, and they vote very very solidly Democrat. We've kind of done this. We've kind of self-selected into this group.
Hmm.
Why do you think it's come about this way? And is it a good thing? I guess I'll put to you.
You mean why the group is voting like Democratic, or is that what you mean?
Yeah, like ought. Yeah, so we can get
Yeah.
into that's a factual one. If we think about it in terms of more of like a moral or an ethical decision, right? Is this
Mm,
right for atheists to behave this way? What is it about the atheist experience that leads to this voting outcome? I think that's the leading question
yeah.
that I'm posing to you.
Right.
Nathan,
Yeah.
I'm trying to take a softball and put it on a tee right in front of you
I'm just sort of
because I know you've got
swinging
this
past
big
it.
bat that's just going to crush it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, actually, I think the thing is, there's probably a number of reasons why. I mean, I suppose one of them is kind of a disgust, I guess, with the kind of evangelicalism Trump and the Republicans were promoting.
Mm,
So I think it's sort of a reaction to that.
mm,
But I think it is also, in general, I think it's the case that nuns and atheists and agnostics and so on are more progressive on issues like abortion and same-sex rights and things like this.
mm,
So I think that sort of explains why they line up more with the Democrats.
yeah. So I mean that makes those are two great points. So the first one is like you're against the party that's against you in that way,
Right.
right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
true. Yes.
So that's a very defensive way, and the other way is that you're more progressive. Is this inherent to the atheist experience, though, to be more progressive? When we think about that, what do we mean?
I think that's really the big question to explore, I think, in the podcast. And I'm not sure the answer yet.
Hmm.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think one of the goals for the podcast is like to sort of to work out these issues and kind of figure out what we actually think about that. um, I'm not sure. Like, I sort of lean toward thinking that there is something kind of inherently progressive among atheists, or like within atheism.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
There may be. I do. I have a few theories that again aren't fleshed out.
Hmm.
There's still. I mean, it's very difficult because the nature of atheism is that you. I mean, I don't. I'm sure you went through this, like that sort of deconversion, where
Hmm.
you are absolutely alone, right? Like you do not
Hmm.
have. There aren't people there, generally speaking. For like my experience was certainly this way. For other atheists I've met, you're not part of a larger community. You're not part of a system or you don't have a book, right? You don't have a
Yeah.
community. You don't have someone who stands in front of everyone else and says this is what we believe. So
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, I think that this is people who like just worked it out themselves. What might make it inherently more progressive, one of the things that I feel absolutely does this, is that separation from those structures
Mm. Mm-hmm.
creates it. So on the one hand, we have a worldview where we reject a certain sort of authority,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where like divinity doesn't matter, right? I think there's a lot. If you had friends and family come to you and say, "We're really worried about your drinking," you might say, "Well, okay, I should do something about it." Or if you had a doctor tell you, "Oh my God, your drinking is out of control. It's going to kill you.
Yeah.
You need to stop." You'd say, "Well, okay, I understand the ramifications to my health." If a priest came up and said, you need to consider drinking less because it's destroying you spiritually," you would say, "Shut the fuck up. I like, who the hell are you? Get away from me," because like you just reject this form of authority,
Right.
and that
Yes.
largely includes not just knowledge gained from divinity, but also parts of traditional authorities. So I think once that's cleared away, you're left to more these secular forms of authority, which coalesce around different issues. And then the other thing is that like we as atheists, we are so removed from that worldview, that structure, that community, that we don't really respond to those sort of religious issues. So one of the cases that we discuss in the article is about the sex education law in
Right.
Washington
Yeah.
State. Washington State is a very, very irreligious region. It differs by section to geographically, but it has one of the largest atheist populations in North America, and it had a sex education law come down. Very, very secular, very progressive, meant to be all encompassing, had positive views about homosexuality, transgender, and of course, religious and right wing groups were upset by this and wanted to turn it down. So they had a referendum and a ballot initiative, meaning instead of going to your congressperson or the governor to change the law, they would do it through a popular ballot.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to get this to make it onto a ballot by collecting hundreds of thousands of signatures, but the church groups were doing it at churches, right? We have right wing groups using church institutions to gather signatures, to spread information, to spread awareness, and to get everybody to vote to get rid of this sex education law. And what that did is, if you to people who are irreligious, to this group of nuns, it meant nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's you're not going to be. So what happened? There were voters there. You have something like, I think it's 33 to 35% of voters in Washington State are irreligious.
Yeah.
So they were never confronted with objections to this law. And if they
Mm-hmm.
were, reading about how it goes against God's will or it's ungodly or it's a sin or whatever, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
So yeah, so I I think this is a part of the atheist experience
Mm-hmm.
that has probably led 75% of atheists, agnostics, and people without religion
Mm-hmm.
to end up on the more progressive side and to reject the views that are focused on godliness, tradition, religion, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I mean, I guess like sex education, or I mean, like opposition to sex education, opposition to abortion, same-sex rights, and so on. Like, yeah, I suppose there are secular arguments against those things, but
Hmm.
most often they are framed in terms of religion. and obviously nuns are not really going to be swayed at all by that. That even could be why they're nuns in the first place, right? That they're not happy with what the church was, or whatever was teaching them about same-sex rights, for
Yeah,
example.
totally.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely part of it. Yeah.
No, well, I mean, that's a weird one. That like the values. Do your values follow your religion, or does your religion follow your values? Do
Hmm.
you think that had an impact on you?
That's a good question. I mean, the funny thing is, like, I also, when I was younger, in addition to being religious, like, I was more conservative.
Mm,
And like in university, I became less conservative and more liberal, but I remained
mm,
Christian. And then eventually, I switched to being an atheist. So in my case, it was the more political things happened first, and then I switched religion.
mm,
But I think like I've also probably become more sort of left wing as I've yeah the longer
mm.
I've been an atheist. But I
Yeah,
mean, I don't know. It's sort of it's hard to say like how they relate to each other. I don't know. I mean, what
yeah.
was your experience?
I this is one that I'm not really sure. I
Yeah.
do think I was heavily influenced by Catholicism
Hmm.
in a political sense. In that, yeah, this is it's tough to tell which came first.
Hmm.
The I don't really remember. I gave up my faith pretty early on. I did not pay it much attention at Sunday school,
Hmm.
and I cannot tell you anything that was ever said in mass except for the one time on I think it was Easter service. I went to the midnight mass in the basement of the cathedral and sat right up front with my mother.
Hmm.
And the priest came out and started telling everybody that we were sinners, and it was
Right.
amazing. So the priest came out. He's like, "You're here today because you're all sinners," and people in the back got really angry.
Oh,
Yeah, and
like
they were.
how so? Like, or how do you know?
There were a couple people who were yelling back, like,
Oh
"You can't
wow,
call me a sinner," and
that's
that's
crazy.
not me. Yeah, it was really crazy, really liberating. But the
Wow.
I mean, the takeaway for me was like it's in that case, the defiance was really that really stuck with me. But it's the
Hmm.
only time I overtly remember a political message, right? Like you are bad.
Right.
That part I definitely picked up through church and Sunday school. Um, but the political indoctrination, I'm not really sure. It's tough to say.
Yeah.
We definitely were raised and brought up in through church and other things with that mentality of like you need to support the downtrodden
Right.
and those who are
Yeah.
worse off.
Yeah.
And it was, and there's definitely a sense. I mean, I definitely had that sense by the time I rejected it that the church was not the institution that was going to correct the wrongs of the world.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think that it was. I think we're apart on this one, where I don't see that my political identity as being attached or to religious identity. I don't recognize any
Yeah.
connection there.
I'm not
And
sure. I mean, I really
yeah,
don't know how I feel about it.
yeah,
um, I mean, it's a really difficult question. I mean, the funny thing is, like, at least for me, I really have trouble trying to figure out, what the connection is between my religious and political
mm,
views. So, I mean, if it's hard for me to like, and I know myself the best out of anyone, so like it's more difficult for me to kind of like say in general, like for society or something, like how are religion and
mm,
politics connected when I'm
yeah,
I'm not even sure what it is for myself. So yeah, it's definitely a complicated question.
yeah. And that's definitely one that we should. All right. See now, this is the nature of self clarification, right?
Hmm.
What do we know? What do we not know? And then we
Yeah.
learn what we don't know, and then we can go on and and find the answer. So
Yes.
what we do know, though,
Uh-huh.
when we reflect on this, is that for whatever reason, we have a huge and growing block of voters
Hmm.
who vote 3-1 Democrat
Yeah.
and seem to be guided by secular progressive views. They're voting progressively.
Hmm.
And we know that they're not, and we haven't gotten into the reasons why we feel this way, but we know that they are not just, it's not young people because they vote stronger Democrat than young people. It's not just,
Yes. Right.
it's not just urban people or college educated because they vote stronger than
Hmm.
those groups. This looks like something that is a block. And also think in the article we talk a little bit about what they've gotten out of it. What have
Yes.
yeah? What
Yeah.
have they gotten?
Or what they haven't gotten out of it, I guess.
Hey now, oh my,
Yeah. I mean, I guess I think the funny thing is, or the interesting thing, that it's harder. It's easy to see what evangelicals got from Trump
mm,
and
yeah,
his administration, whereas it's more difficult to see what the nuns are getting out of it. I think Biden. So I guess we should say we're recording this on the 4th of February, and I guess like early on, Biden has rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement or Accords, I
hmm
guess. And I think it's like climate change is something important to, or I mean, like fighting against climate change is important to just secular people. But I mean, it's like, was he doing that, as sort of a gift to secular people, or was he doing that for its own merits? And I mean, I think it's like it seems probably the case that he wasn't doing it just with secular people in mind
yeah,
or at all. Whereas like with Trump's, like Supreme Court appointments or whatever,
yeah,
I mean, it's pretty clear like he was trying to support or trying to throw a bone to the evangelicals who did so much to get him elected.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, the Trump language about religious liberty, the appointments of people like Betsy DeVos to
Hmm.
education, which
Hmm.
is just like it's not very sensible. Yeah, most of Biden's moves now look like that sort of progressive nun overlap, where it's
Yeah.
you have secularism, you have this sort of like worldly rationalism, a trust in science, a belief in science, a rejection of faith-based everything,
Hmm.
in a turn to at least a world that is secular with, and this is the weird thing, is with a very religious, a lot of religious rhetoric, I suppose,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is something that we see in all of Biden's speeches. It usually ends with "God bless America" and "God bless the
Hmm.
troops" and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I guess I should say that I'm Canadian, so this is not directly relevant to me. But you're from the U.S.
yes.
But like, I don't know, like, what do you think about when he uses? I mean, it's so common for every politician to use the religious language, but I mean, like, what is your view of it? Like, does it offend you or what?
Um, it there his reliance on like blessing the troops
Yeah.
that does frighten me.
Mm.
It's echoes of George W. Bush. It sounds a lot like warmongering, which is
Right.
unfortunately something that centrist Democrats are fine with. That's the grave concern it gives me.
Mm.
It is also a reminder that that atheists are still a minority, and it's still a mostly unpopular minority.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
Whereas we know that the acceptance of lots of other groups have improved over the past 20, 25, 30 years, atheism is still very treated very much suspect and looked down upon. It's also something that you just kind of have to say to
Yeah.
get ahead. And So I think there's this acceptance of it, but it's not desirable.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
does. So, okay. So is this, Nathan, we've been doing this for a while now. Is it okay to start to transition into what we should start thinking about for next time we talk about this? Because I think it's gonna
Yeah.
dovetail nicely.
I just wanted to make one final point
Hmm.
about the religious language. Just that, just another point that we made in the article about this religious language for Biden. Like at some point, that's going to be increasingly sort of out of place if the Democratic coalition is so strongly supported by nuns. Like eventually, it's going to be quite strange and off-putting if like Biden or
Hmm.
whoever are kind of using this religious language.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it should be, shouldn't it? That's the strange
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
But this it also leads to what we are. I think what we were thinking about already in terms of next step is like, well, what is it that you want? If you look, and again, to go back to the Trump example, evangelicals got exactly what they wanted from a thrice divorced um, billionaire who lies about everything and sleeps with porn stars and has them spank him with magazines. Like, that's
That's their champion. Yes.
right. Like, that's what. Yeah, that's the guy you wanted.
Yeah.
Um, and it's, do you want someone who says the right things, or do you want someone who does the right things? And that is, they can be mutually exclusive, and that's,
Mhm.
I think, what we need to start thinking about. Because, like you said, everything, there's this progressive secular overlap, but not everything overlaps.
Yes. Right.
So there are things that are secular desires that we have not seen advanced by progressive politicians yet.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
Um,
yeah,
yeah. And I mean, I guess, yeah, we could talk more in a future episode kind of about, yeah, how can these sort of progressive or nuns, like non-religious people's demands be satisfied by politicians? That sounds
right,
kind of
yeah,
sexual, but
yeah. But
yeah.
yeah, well, and the thing, just to recap again, what
Yeah.
we know is that, like, we are, if you are an unbeliever
Hmm.
and a progressive, it's like there's a commonality that we don't fully understand yet, and we're trying to work out.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
also a quarter who seem to go against this, and
Right.
we don't have an explanation for that either. And we don't have, I don't think we have the language or tools or logic or reasons to tell people who didn't vote for Biden that they're wrong. Like, you can be an atheist and still be a conservative in some way.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's, yeah, but it's just that there is this huge block, and if if the Democrats embraced it and started making it a cause celeb,
Hmm.
it would probably attract that other 25% of a growing demographic. Um, but the continuation of religious language and trumpeting religious practices may drive them away.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, the flip side is like if they embrace non-religious people too strongly, then that might alienate religious people in their coalition. So it's
Yeah, but religious people are only 75% of the population, Nathan.
right.
They're, yeah,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
older and less gay. So,
yeah. I mean, it is like I mean, the Republicans did the same with their white evangelicals. Like, I mean, obviously that put off many people, but they did it anyway. So I don't know. I mean, it's something to think more about anyway for a future episode.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So
yeah,
we've got to get to that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Should we wrap it up here?
I think we should.
All
That's a
right.
good idea.
Okay. All right.
All
So I
right.
guess we'll talk next time.
Yeah, we'll see everyone next time and enjoy
Yep.
being godless.
Yes. All right.
All
Bye.
right.